Hi, I already know some of you. I see at least one face that I recognize, Courtney. Hi. And because I've trained a lot of you guys in getting peer support certified. I don't know about a lot, but I know a few, or I've worked with a few. But I will say, I've worked in peer support for, it'll be 9 years in November. And I've trained peer support certification courses for about 6 years. I kind of lost track in that black hole of COVID. But late summer, I am an air conditioning junkie, especially these days with health issues that kind of limit some things. But it's always about finding the power that we have, right? I will say, if you want to say hi to me or anything like that, I don't look at the chat because you don't want me to look at the chat because I have ADHD. And one of the ways I manage my system symptoms is not looking at the chat. So use the Q&A if you want to reach out to me. Do we have any questions before we get into the material? Like, no, we just want our CAUs. Go, 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 right? Okay. We good? We're moving then. Um, so, uh, and I'm hoping that the Zoom is giving us captions because otherwise,
Yes, it is.
okay, good, good, good. Because I can't see them and I'm glad it's working. Um, so the objectives of this course are to define common terminology and review the Certified Peer Support Specialist Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct for the state of Idaho. We're going to learn how healthy boundaries are the core of ethical and professional conduct and learn tips and tricks to help the peer support workforce better understand and implement boundaries with peers and in the workplace. One of the things we hear all the time, boundaries, 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 but we were very rarely given details on what does that look like? What are some ways to implement that better? And so that's one of the reasons we developed this course, or I developed this course in the way that I did after working in this field for a while. So the purpose of boundaries in peer services is threefold. Um, and the self-care aspect of it, it helps us have a better work and life balance. And it protects us from responsibilities that are not ours, which can really quickly lead to burnout, which is the next one. It protects us from burnout that way. And it maintains and builds our recovery. In peer services, this is good for everybody, but in peer services especially, we're here because we've experienced symptoms. And as such, and we've also experienced recovery, and good boundaries help maintain and build that recovery that is the core of us being peer providers, right? Then when it comes to peer growth, which is a lot of times we don't necessarily focus on this when we talk about boundaries, it's about protecting ourselves. But peer growth is an equal part of the purpose of boundaries. It is more strengths based. It acknowledges and builds on the strengths that the peer has that we are working with. It allows the building of skills and confidence and responsibility in our peers, which helps them in their recovery journey. It helps them to move forward. And proper boundaries for our peer growth, it encourages finding of appropriate resources and empowers individuals to make positive changes in their own lives. And that's a required part of recovery. Nobody can take anybody else, push anybody else to recovery. They have to choose it. And that requires good boundaries on our part. And then ethically, it better supports confidentiality when we have better boundaries. It keeps us in our lane. Those scopes there, it supports peer supporters recovery, which is, it says, oh, well, that's under self-care. It's also 2 items in our code of ethics as well. And it reduces legal liability and increases ethical compliance. All of these are positive things. I mean, if you listen to social media, boundaries are just about cutting people out of your lives that are uncomfortable. And that is, well, that's completely wrong, honestly. But even if when it comes to self-care, that's only a small portion of the thing, this the purpose that boundaries serve in peer support. So one of the things we look at is types of boundaries. And this is from positivepsychology.com is where we got this graphic. But the time includes how much time you spend with someone or doing something. And that seems kind of simple. It can be a little more complicated when there's things such as time blindness and time optimism with diagnoses such as ADHD, but time is a very important boundary. How much time am I going to give to this? And so many times, like, it's just another minute, or they're still talking, maybe I can't walk away. I have literally, now this is with family members, walked away with people talking after I've set a boundary. I have to leave at 2 p.m. and they keep talking, and I will walk away. And it's hard at first to set and enforce boundaries like that. But once we've given them the power to choose, we can set boundaries like that. And those family members would follow me talking, and I get in my car and they're still talking, and I roll down my window and start my car and they're still talking. And I drive away and see them still talking in my rearview mirror. But that is a valuable boundary to have because we have limits to how much time we have, right? Then there's mental boundaries, the freedom to have your own thoughts, values, and opinions. I respect your perspective, although I do not agree. That can be really challenging sometimes, especially when we've been brought up to, ooh, I don't want to challenge this. I want this person to feel supported. Yeah, and we may not want, but it's a good boundary to say, you know what? I don't agree with that, and that's okay. I recognize that you can have your opinion, and that's okay, and I can have my opinion, and that's okay. Because a good boundary recognizes each side and gives them equal value. And then there's emotional boundaries. How emotionally available you are to others. As much as I want to support you right now, I don't have the emotional capacity. That will sometimes happen in peer support, where we're working with a peer and they bring up a topic, and we're like, get that deer in the headlights look. Oh no. And not only are we not counselors, it's not our role to process things, but that emotional boundary, it is okay and appropriate and a good boundary to say, I am not in a place to process. I can't, I don't have the emotional capacity to deal with that. Have to talk to your counselor about that. Those are really good things. And sometimes it feels so awkward. I mean, even when I'm pretending right now, I'm just giving the example. It sometimes gets a little bit, but it's okay. And it also models to our peers that there are times and places that those things can be better heard, and that it's okay for them to say no to others as well, to taking those things on. Then there's material boundaries. This one is one of the more obvious ones. Your peer orders something, you're out with them in the community, and they order something at McDonald's or Starbucks, and then they don't have the cash. We don't lend them money. We don't give them things. We don't lend them things. We don't take things. That is a very firm ethical, and I mean it helps in all three parts that boundaries help with: the self-care and the peer support and the ethical. It would violate all three of those to do any kind of material, to be loose on our material boundaries. I have very, very, very strict rules, and I find it the biggest thing that's hardest for a lot of my peers is, oh, I'll just get you this, and I'm like, nope. And they're like, no, but I want to. I don't care, but I need to. Nope. Nope. It's a rule. Nope. And if I repeat this, and it becomes less personal, but a lot of times what we see with peers, it's not just about showing gratitude that they're trying to do. A lot of times it's part of, they feel they have to buy our affection or our friendship or our support. And so it's part of learning that they can have support that they don't have to pay for, if that makes sense. And that's very, very valuable, and that's something we don't often recognize. So those material boundaries are very important as well. Internal boundaries are self-regulation, how much we spend on ourselves, how much we spend on others, but there's a lot of self-regulation there. We're going to learn about more about that in the next slide. Conversational boundaries, topics that you do and do not feel comfortable discussing. Good rule of thumb in peer support, we avoid politics and religion. A lot of people avoid those in general. That can weaken our ability to deal with difficult concepts. But in peer support, it can often be very problematic. So there's some topics and that we can usually be best to avoid discussing. And then there's physical boundaries, and that's privacy, personal space, your body. A good rule of thumb in peer support, and a lot of agencies have rule about this, is no touchy. That's the way I tend to say it, is we don't, and that can be awkward. Some people are huggers. They really need hugs. They really want some oxytocin from the physical touch. Follow what your agency says, but also follow what you feel comfortable with. We can and should set boundaries with that as well. And it's going to look a little different with different people. For instance, people from the East Coast, we have moderate, medium-sized elevators here in Idaho, and and usually in Idaho, you get like 4 people on an elevator, and somebody will look at that and say, "Oh, that's done. I'll take the next one." And in East Coast, they have a much smaller concept of personal space, and they'll cram 12, 15 people in an elevator that size and not blink twice because that's what they're used to. So this is something that what you feel comfortable with, what your peer feels comfortable with, but we can set the boundaries on that as sort of thing as well. So any questions on types of boundaries? Does this make sense? This is going to all add up and hopefully be a little bit more helpful as we go along. The next thing is something that I've developed as I was learning boundaries through a lot of the peer support stuff as a way that really helps me to better set and enforce boundaries in my work and in my life. And that's something I call levels of boundaries. There's internal boundaries, or boundaries you set and keep for yourself regarding your own feelings and actions for and about yourself. One of the things, it's both for protection and maintenance and of our own well-being, but it's also for concentration of power. We spread ourselves too thin by saying I have to do everything. We're not going to do any of it very well, right? But if we can concentrate and set some boundaries for ourselves, we can get really good at some of the things that we do. External boundaries are those you set for and enforce regarding the actions of others and our feelings about others. And we want to remember these because we're going to do some of these in the coming slides, but I'm going to give you some examples on this. Like an internal emotional boundary may look like, I am not going to yell at myself or get angry with myself or upset with myself when I'm trying something new and I'm not good at it right away. That is a hard boundary for me. I'm really good at cussing myself out. That's a hard boundary, but it helps maintain my wellness. An internal physical boundary may look like something like, I recognize that I found this new show and I really like it, but I have stuff to do tomorrow, so I am only going to watch 2 episodes of the show. Because otherwise I'm going to watch 18 episodes of the show and I'm going to try to do the stuff tomorrow with no sleep whatsoever. So, but if I can stop myself at 2, it's a little bit easier, because stopping myself after 5 is almost impossible. And that's something I've learned about myself. So I said that internal physical boundary is something I'm doing that I say I'm going to do this, and I'm doing it because I know that the consequences, that the enforcing is going to be a natural thing. Because if I don't do that, I'm going to suffer in the next day, right? It could have to do with how we spend money. It can do with how what we eat. It can do with how we physically treat ourselves. But the physical boundaries are things that are done. The emotional boundaries are limits to what we feel. Then external emotional, I am not going to feel responsible for the consequences of that other person's actions. This comes up all the time in peer support, but it comes up a lot with our family and friend relationships as well. Oh no, look at that. I gotta fix it. Or I gotta, no, I am going to let them own that. because that's better for me, that's better for them, and that helps me maintain my ethics a little bit better, that external emotional. And that can be hard because, like, well, who can, nobody knows if what I'm feeling. I can still let myself feel that, but that leads into the external physical. I am going to let them have the consequences of their own choices, and I'm not going to fix it, because as peer support, is there ever our job to fix things? Ever? That our peers? No, absolutely not. Never. It is never our job to do for. It is never our job to fix. It is never, ever our job to save. Our job is to support while the peer figures that out. Because if we don't, if we cross that boundary, we disempower them. We take away their abilities to, and we hamper their ability to properly be able to fully recover, because recovery is a choice. That's one of the foundations of it. And if we're taking away the choice by trying to fix things, we're hurting them. There are roles that can be there to help fix things. Case management, occasionally CBRS, counselors sometimes, PCS even, but that is not our role. Our role is to support them while they find and build on the strengths that they have or can have. And so when we set those external physical boundaries, I'm not going to bail them out if they're short a dollar. I am not going to give them the answers. I am not going to make suggestions. I am not going to do these things. That gives them, but I'm going to support them and not the goal. That gives them worth, that gives them confidence, it gives them the opportunities to learn and grow in a safe place, because they're not risking our rejection. Because we're supporting them, not their success, not their saving, not their goals. We're supporting them and that helps empower them to reach their goals. And the emotional boundaries of not feeling responsible for outcomes or saving or fixing will help us to enforce those physical boundaries. It's a lot easier to let them try to figure out an answer, even if it takes a while, even if they're pushing back. If we recognize emotionally, it is inappropriate for me to do that, and I'm going to not feel responsible for that. Does that make sense? Is this something that we recognize, oh, this is kind of hard in peer support? Because we come into this role, we want to fix, we want to save, we want to help. The old-fashioned view of help, right? And by helping, it means fixing, right? But helping in peer support is not fixing. Helping in peer support is supporting. And that is far more empowering. And there's been a lot of studies that show that that has been a lot more powerful than a lot of ways, because nobody can take somebody or force somebody into recovery. Recovery has to be a choice. And it has to be built on a series of choices, and having support while they make those choices, very valuable. And that's what we do. So, breaking down the peer support code of ethics in terms of boundaries. We'll be focusing on the CPSS code of ethics and professional conduct for this presentation, but this applies to pretty much all peer supporting positions, enough that hopefully you'll be able to take what you've learned and apply it to the few differences in any other code of ethics, like family code of ethics or peer recovery coaches, other things like this. Mary is going to put in the chat some links to the code of ethics if you do not have them with you right now. We're not going to cover absolutely every item in our code of ethics, but we will cover most of them. I'm going to present a scenario for different items that we're going to cover, and then we're going to discuss how boundaries can best be used or misused in the situation, how that ties to ethical compliance, and what types of boundaries, like internal, external, physical, emotional, those levels, and the different. And we could also look at the types such as time and material that would help most, and how one type of boundary might affect another. Okay. So you guys have links. You guys all have that pulled up. I'm gonna ask you to have that handy and ready to go to answer questions during the presentation. Again, I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to use the chat. I'm going to use the Q&A. And I also appreciate that I think it's Celica that you're already doing that, and I appreciate that because that is what I'm focusing on. You guys ready? Gonna go. Okay. So the first scenario, peer supporter Tim has a good rapport with his peer John. John doesn't have a lot of natural support, so Tim sometimes gives John rides outside of their session times, and they have long conversations that are sometimes about some of Tim's struggles. So the questions I'm going to ask, if I can hit the right button, is what code of ethics or which code of ethics are being violated in this scenario? That's the first question. And put them in the Q&A if you got answers. Oh, Mary, what you got? You guys looking over your code of ethics, trying to figure out which ones might be getting violated here?
Let's see here. I did see helping outside of sessions. And I'll answer a question. Someone asked, where is the Q&A? Look in more on your menu and you will find Q&A.
Yeah.
And Sandra put 10 in for an answer.
Okay. And I in my notes I didn't number them, so I'm trying to remember which one. Is that dual relationships? Okay, yeah, dual relationships, absolutely. So John or Tim is not just being a peer support here. He is also trying to have dual and multiple relationships here, being a taxi service. Yep. And he is being a kind of a general friend. He's also being, I mean, peer support is mutual and reciprocal. So Tim talking about stuff, but Tim having just a sit down conversation with some of his struggles is not appropriate in general in our role. Stuff that's been resolved, yes, because then we're modeling, we could be sharing lived experience. Stuff we're currently working through, not appropriate for our role. So because one of the things we do is we role model recovery, and that's the first code of ethic, and he's not role modeling recovery well when he's doing that, is he? So D says most code of ethics obviously have not banned dual relationships, but does caution. Ours bans it. We do not enter into dual relationships. So the Idaho Certified Peer Support Specialist Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct specifically forbids dual relationships. And that is what we're working on. We're not working on any off of other things. I mean, there may be other things in the other peer provider roles, but that core one specifically says no. We also respect the rights and the dignity of those they serve. If we're working with somebody who has a need and we swoop in to meet that need rather than supporting them to find ways to meet it themselves, are we respecting their rights or their dignity? Are we recognizing their power? Or are we seeing their limitations? Anyone? I'm not even getting any nods or head shakes here. Yeah, Lorraine, thank you. Yes, correct. We are not when we do that. But they need help. That is not our role. Our role is not the swooping in. Our role is not the doing for. Our role is not the helping. Our role is supporting them and being strengths focused, which is focusing on what they can do, which may be something they're kind of weak at right now, and that's okay. That's why we're supporting them. And that can be who else can possibly give you a ride? And D, we need to give them agency and autonomy. Absolutely. We are there to empower them. We don't empower them by doing things for them. We empower them by having enough faith and confidence in them to recognize that their rights and their dignity, to be able to at least self-advocate or build up the skills to self-advocate, to find resources to do those things themselves. And that's what the power is. They may not ever be able to drive themselves. That's okay. That doesn't mean they can't do anything. If we see their limitations, we're not respecting their rights and dignity, and that is part of our code of ethics. Another one that is being violated here. So I'm still watching the Q&A for anything else. Another thing is conducting ourselves in a manner that fosters our own recovery. If a person is spending time outside of session time giving up peer rides and using that person that they're supposed to be supporting and using them as a support, I'm going to chat about my own things. Are they fostering their own recovery, or are they getting into a level of relationship that's going to be a challenge? Anyone? I'm going to start saying Bueller. I'm dating myself. Bueller. So those are some things there. We mentioned dual relationships. Another thing is equalizing power differentials. And that has come up before. This can be a tricky one. It's one of the reasons I wear t-shirts, and through the summer I wear shorts. I'm not going to dress up for my role because that increases the power differential. But this can kind of, when we put ourselves in a position where we're not strictly sticking to our role, that's going to mess with the power differential, right? Because when we are the ride, we have more power. And that's not part of our role there, is it? And documentation is true and accurate. If your documentation says you met with this person for 2 hours on Tuesday, but you gave them rides on Wednesday and Thursday, is your documentation true and accurate? Nope, because we have to document that sort of thing, because relationships outside of our role and our session times are violation of code of ethics, and that can be all kinds of problems. And we want to remain aware of our skills and limitations. If we're having trouble and with the conversations we're having, and maybe slipping into a counselor role or stuff like this, we're not being very aware of our skills and limitations. These are all parts of our codes of ethics. So moving a little bit forward. So what are some of the dangers? What damage is possible from the ethical violations in this scenario? To which person in this, and how? Sandra says, how about sharing a struggle you have had that is similar to something the peer is going through and what they did and how it worked out for us? Then maybe they can start to come up with things that could possibly work for them. Okay, so that is a very, very, very good thing, because a lot of times part of our role is sharing our lived experience, okay? And that is valuable. However, we have to look at the motivations behind that. If our motivation to sharing our experience is to help them feel less alone and to help them feel hope, and sometimes what I call priming the pump, which is letting them know something is possible, then cool, we're doing our job. Because that's, help them feel it's and normalizing and oh, well, okay, oh, this is possible. Yeah, okay, starting to get some ideas now. But if we're doing it to guide them, then we're messing up. Does that make sense? Because then we're slipping out of our role and we're doing more CBRS. Oh, I know how you can fix this. Bump, 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 nudge, nudge, nudge. And then we're slipping out of our role. We're no longer supporting, we're trying to guide. So yes, sharing a struggle we have had, not one we haven't worked out, because especially at that point, it's not about sharing hope and things like that. Then it's like kind of doing it for our own purposes. for our own support. So when we are sharing a struggle, we want to have it resolved or mostly resolved so we can foster hope and help them feel less alone, things like that. But we never shared a guide. Does that make sense? That's a different role. That's more CBRS. That's skill building. And sometimes, but they don't know what it is. Okay. Then we get into things like we use tools like motivational interviewing to ask questions. Where can you look? Who can you turn to? Because that gives them power. Do you see how that works? When we guide, we're taking away their power. Does that help, Sandra? I can't see you, so I hope it does. So Chris mentions it pushes the peer supporter closer to burnout because of the lack of work-life balance. Absolutely. So that is damage possible to the peer supporter and makes the peer feel dependent instead of empowered. Again, absolutely. They now know that they're not building up skills or resources to find more appropriate sources of transportation, for instance. They are now becoming more dependent on the provider. Erica says it can create a power imbalance and put the burden of Tim's recovery onto John's recovery. Yeah, it power imbalance, and it's just messing with things, right? Leah says makes the peer feel less than and that they aren't able to solve their own problems. Yeah, they may not feel less than. Yeah, I'm so grateful you're helping me. But, so they may not feel consciously less than. They may be grateful, but the thing is, they don't feel capable, and that is technically less than. Yeah, I am dependent. I can't do this. Thank you for covering this for me. What? What do you mean? Who else could I ask for a ride? Oh, that can be like terrifying, but that is a skill that they can build. That's something that is possible, that is empowering to them. And that helps them learn how to solve a lot of their own problems, even within their own limitations. Excellent. You guys are doing so well with this. Thank you for getting going on the Q&A. We're getting going on this. So next, what types of boundaries, like internal boundaries?
I have a question.
Yes. And I do ask you to use the Q&A, please. But
oh, sorry, I didn't interrupt you.
Thank you.
Okay, no worries about that.
Otherwise, everybody's going to, it's like, oh, we can take talking. This is one of those things where I have to set a boundary and it has to be universal. One person asking a question is not a problem, but if I allow it, everybody thinks, oh, I can just ask a question. That's easier than finding the Q&A and typing it. And then everybody's talking. And then we have chaos and cats and dogs living together, and it's just crazy. Anyway, Dee mentions this shifts accountability. It does shift some accountability as well. And it puts a little bit too much responsibility on Tim for John's well-being, and it puts a little bit too much responsibility on John for Tim's emotional well-being if he's sharing his own things. So, and neither of those is appropriate, correct? And again, if you're having trouble finding the Q&A, down in the little Zoom toolbar, usually off to one side is a circle with 3 dots in it that says more. If you click on that, Q&A is usually one of the options there. And I don't know why it's telling me I have 9 on ads. Oh, they're just open. I looked at them. Okay. So, what levels, like internal or external, or types like material or time and other things like that, of boundaries would help Tim avoid these ethical violations? I'm more interested in the levels, even though it says types here, because that's what I used to call it. And I keep forgetting to edit that. And every time I look at it, I miss it.
Dyany, I did put the link in the chat that has the boundary levels in it. So if you click on that, you can have that cheat sheet in front of you. It's 2 pages and the levels are on the 2nd page.
Thank you, Mary. So you guys, hopefully that'll help, because I could go back and forth so you can look at it, but then we miss the scenario. So that would be helpful. So Erica says internal, and just for the sake of time, I'm going to expand on that, because I say yes, there's definitely some internal boundaries. Because do you think Tim is feeling responsible for John getting places? he's feeling that about stuff, but is he actually responsible for John's transportation? If you have your camera on, I'll accept a head shake or a nod or a shake. See if I can say that straight. But is Tim responsible for John's transportation? Nope. Absolutely, smurfly not. No, absolutely not. And then the second he feels responsible for that, it's going to make it harder for him to say no. And if it's harder for him to say no and he says yes, then boom, a dependence is formed. And Tim reinforces that idea, I am responsible for this. Especially because John's going to say, where were you? I needed to get here. And Tim could be like, I was busy. Well, I didn't have anybody else. Well, that's because John didn't have the opportunity given to him. He wasn't empowered to be able to build up that skill and those resources. And now he is now dependent on Tim for something Tim should not be responsible for. So those internal boundaries lead to external boundary violations. And yes, we got some problems there. Anything else? What other types or levels of boundaries might be helpful later? Oh, there we go. I wish this thing would automatically scroll. So Joy says only give a ride when on the clock. Yes. And even then, it's never giving him a ride, right? It is supporting him if they need emotional support in their goals. And that involves being in another place, like Walmart is scary, so we support them in that. Then connecting them with that while we support them is appropriate. Taking them to Walmart because they need a ride to Walmart is not appropriate. Does that make sense? And that can be hard because that can change over the course of working with a peer. But yes, Joyce says only give them doing that transportation on their own and help them connect to other ways to get to a point with medical transport. And I don't even like using the word help these days because we have so much doing for when we think of help that I like to say support him in finding other ways to an appointment. Like, what else can you ask for? What other providers do you have? What other resources do you have? Who else can you ask? Who else? I don't have anybody. Well, where can you look? All these things, because I don't have anybody. Poof, that shuts down. Oop, no power. I have no power. I have no power. That's not how we move into recovery. But if we're asking those questions, who else can you look? Where can you look? What other kind of providers do you think you could talk to? Other things like this, that is empowering because that helps them use what abilities they do have to get their needs met. And material, absolutely. The material boundaries Dee mentions is, material boundary is Tim is using his car and his gas to give somebody a ride that he shouldn't be giving a ride to. And I don't like the word should, but it's a really quick way to say this is an inappropriate way for boundary he's setting. And so, that's a material boundary that needs to be set. And time and gas, absolutely. So we have the time boundary as well. It's like, I am not available at these times. I'm not available outside of our session times. If you need to reach out to me for a question about our next appointment or let me know something, you can do that, but I may not be able to answer the phone or respond to your text. We set those boundaries, the professional boundaries we have there. And scrolling through all my notes here. So we don't want to guide or suggest. Here, you should use MTM for that. Here, you should use Access Bus for that. No, because then we're CBRS or maybe even case management in those cases. Like, where could you look? What other providers can you ask? What other resources do you have? And it's like, I don't know. Well, what other providers do you have? Well, I have case management and CBRS. Okay. How do you think they might be able to help you with that? Because, I can't give you answers, but where do you think you could look? Well, my case manager says they're supposed to link me with stuff. Okay. And my CBRS is supposed to teach me stuff. Yeah. So how can that help you? And how can that possibly help you get closer to what you want? And how can I support you in that? And things like that, because we support, we don't enable, we don't do for. Excellent, excellent, you guys. So do you guys feel comfortable with that one? You ready to move on to the next scenario? Oh, here's a, I swear I have to scroll and scroll. Yeah, time is definitely one not scheduled to work with them, and setting goals on using outside service for transportation. Okay, but who gets to set the goals? Is it us or is it the peer? It's the peer, right? Absolutely 100% always the peer. So if the peer wants that, then that's great. We can support them in that. Otherwise, it can be using out finding services for transportation can be part of another goal that they have. Maybe their goal is I want to be more social, but being more social can mean I want to not be terrified reaching out to services and options. And I want to have resources to be able to go places besides where MTM can take me. And those are all going to involve us supporting them while they practice the skills, find the resources, find the tools to help them to get transportation and other things like that. Do you see how that works? So they're all building up those, this thing keeps scrolling back. That helps them to build up their own strengths, which helps them build confidence and power and move into recovery. The Q&A is freaking out on me. Okay, I'm moving forward while this thing freaks out. So I'm going to hit, so this is scenario 2. So peer support Sally has a peer named Jane with a physical disability that limits her mobility. Sally doesn't have a lot of physical strength. That's the peer supporter. But she pushes herself to help get Jane in and out of Sally's car, as well as gets Jane's wheelchair loaded into the trunk. Jane seems really thankful, so Sally knows she can't let Jane down by showing any reluctance or weakness. Sally knows Jane relies on Sally's help and feels successful when she is able to get Jane where she wants to go. So what code of ethics are being violated in this scenario? Oh, you guys are making it hard on me. 7 and 12, and I really need to edit my notes to put numbers on things. So somebody give me a hint as to what 7 is.
So 7 is certified peer supports do not practice, condone, facilitate, or collaborate with any form of discrimination. And what was the other one?
Okay,
12.
yes, let me work on that one before we get to 12. So 7, absolutely, because what the kind of discrimination we're having is we're doing ableism. We see a limitation and we define that person by the limitation. She has to use a wheelchair to get around. Oh no, disability. I have to do for because of this obvious disability. Do we have to do for? Is it our role to do for? Absolutely not. It is not our role to do for. And it is discriminating against this person because it is defining all of their capacity by this limitation. Does that make sense? Does she have this person most likely have people in her lives that their role is to support in some ways? Yes, and they're not ours to physically support. Does this person have capacities even if she cannot move around a lot without a wheelchair? Yes, and we're ignoring those. She's not advocating for herself appropriately. She's not finding the power that she has, and we are discriminating against her because of that. And we don't think we're doing that, but it's a a lot of times, especially if we haven't had those limitations ourselves, what we see with those obvious limitations is the limitation and not the person. And then we're not supporting them. We're supporting getting the thing done. Mary, what's 12? Thank you for helping with us.
No problem. 12 is certified peer support specialists work to equalize the power differentials.
Absolutely. Now, she is putting herself in a position of power here, isn't she? Sally is. She is putting herself in a position where Jane is reliant on her because Sally has the power. Jane could have power to recognize the other physical supports that she has, to build up maybe, because one of the things I have worked with people with things like this, and they have physical powers a lot of times, not always, but there's differing amounts of things that they can do. And I've worked with people that they could transfer themselves. They have transfer boards specifically for this, where they could transfer themselves from the wheelchair to the car with that transfer board. But the people I've worked with very often fight against it and don't always have quite the strength because of people swooping in to, oh, you can't do that, I'll do it for you, and taking that power that they have and taking it away. And that's not okay. That is not our role. And so we work to equalize that power differential. You have the power to do this, and I'm going to let you have it. Even if you have to practice it to get a little stronger, I can be patient and I can be supportive by setting boundaries. And I am not going to lift you there, especially because I'm acknowledging my own limitations, because that's another thing, is we're conducting themselves in a manner that fosters our own recovery. We says, Sally doesn't have a lot of physical strength. Is she recognizing her own limitations when she pushes herself to move Jane into her car? No, she isn't. Now, that's an ethical violation, but it is also a legal liability waiting to happen. A workers' comp claim or a full-on lawsuit if something happens and Jane gets hurt in one of these transfer things that should never be happening because it is absolutely not Sally's role, correct? Do you see how that works? We have ethical things, and the ethical thing is there by itself, but it also supports the idea of, yeah, I don't want to get sued but I was helping her. It doesn't matter when it comes to a lawsuit. Were you supposed to help her? Oh, wait, no, I wasn't. That wasn't my job. Was I capable of helping her? Was I trained to help her in that way? No. So we set those boundaries, right? And one of the things we do, part of our ethics, we openly share our recovery stories. We're like, what does that have to do with it? That can include owning our own limitations. I have arthritis in my lower back and conditions in my hands, and I cannot support you in that way. It's also not my role, but I have found, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to not be perfect. It's okay to not try to force yourself to do things that you don't feel comfortable doing in the moment, even if you feel pressure to do so. And, again, remaining aware of skills and limitations, all these things. These make sense in this situation. So moving on. So what damage is possible from the ethical violations in this scenario, and to whom and how?
Dyany, there was one other code that was listed, 15. And it's CPSS remain aware of their skills and limitations and do not provide services or represent themselves, blah, 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 blah.
Exactly, because they're representing themselves as basically a physical support there, and we're not. And D mentions have a conversation about natural and facilitated supports. So the official terms that we've always, natural supports are people who don't get paid, basically. And and then there's professional supports, which are providers that are usually paid to do things. And we also can have a conversation about different roles. Case manager has a different role than CBRS has a different role than peer support has a different role than PCS has a different role than ResHab has a different role than med management, et cetera, et cetera. And we stay in our role. We stay in our lane. Stephanie mentioned she works in permanent supportive housing, and this is something we have to be very careful with due to this is supposed to be independent living. Absolutely. And everybody I've worked with that's in positions like this, there's a term I have called a bad boundary Betty. If it's a guy, it's a bad boundary Bob. And one of the things that we sometimes have to deal with is working with individuals who have worked with or are working with bad boundary Bettys or Bobs, in which case they may have unrealistic or disempowering assumptions about what everybody's supposed to do. Well, my last provider, they would just carry me around like this. But but that doesn't make it right. And we can still be good about our boundaries. That's another it's like, that's a boundary I've set. It's like, okay, that person does these things. That doesn't mean I feel zero pressure to do the wrong thing. And that's hard for me sometimes. Sometimes like, wait, am I really in the right here? Wait, the code of ethics, what are they doing? It's like, nope, I no longer feel pressure to do the wrong thing because I've started to see the damage it does. I've worked with individuals who have no hope that they can ever change or move into recovery because all their life people have taught them that they can't because they swoop in. And that we don't think we're telling it, we're helping, right? We're teaching them that they can't. We're teaching them that they have no power. We're teaching them they have no way to do it themselves. And that is cruel. And I've seen it destroy so much hope. Don't do that. So what if you do have the training to do something as such, but it's not specifically in your job description? Okay, there's three scopes that cover staying in your lane. One is scope of competence, and that's stuff that we're trained for. So if we're not trained to do it, we can't do it. The other is the scope of practice, and that is what you are hired to do, and that is covered in your job description. So scope of practice, you may be trained to do it, but if that's not what you're hired to do, you're not doing it. Okay. And the third one is the scope of current role, because sometimes in rare occasions, we may be hired at an agency to have more than one role. Like in a very small town, you may be CBRS and case management and peer support, but you only do what you are hired to do and what you are scheduled to do in that period of time. CBRS and case management can have some mixing together, but peer support cannot. So even if you work with that person in all those roles, you're like, nope, I cannot do that because that's a peer support thing, and we'll do that in the peer support appointment. Otherwise, we'll do it in, and when your peer support role, nope, I can't do that. That's a CBRS thing. We have to do it in the CBRS appointment. And sometimes that can be hard for peers to understand. I honestly have when I think about it, I would almost have to have a separate physical thing like a hat to keep me in. No, wait, which am I doing right now? Okay. Because those are all important parts of staying in our lane. We have the scope of practice, scope of competence, and scope of current role. Does that help, Sandra? Because we have to meet all of those. Scrolling. Scope, yes. Scope of practice, scope of competence, and scope of current role. So yeah, those are the three scopes that we have to follow when we're staying in our lane. Sorry, that is important, but it is it was a little bit of a tangent. So some other damage that's possible with this is, somebody can get physically hurt. It damages Jane's recovery because she becomes more dependent and she does not find the power she has to maybe build up the strength to move herself into the car, or to self-advocate better, or to find appropriate resources to do it. So it gets in the way of her recovery. And Sally runs the risk of hurting herself. And if there's a lawsuit, if Jane gets hurt, she runs the risk of losing her job and burnout, because it's like, no, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine, until it's not fine. And then it's usually a little too late if we've been saying it's fine, it's fine, it's fine for all this time, right? And a lot of us have been there. And sometimes we do that in our personal relationships, but it absolutely happens. So what types or levels of boundaries would help Sally avoid the ethical violations here?
There are a couple of questions about scopes in the Q&A.
Yeah, I've seen them and I have recovered them all again. Hopefully I got them all. Yeah, there's nothing else to scroll to, so. But yeah, scope of competence, what we've been trained in, scope of practice, what we're currently hired for, and scope of current role, what we are scheduled to do in that moment in time. Thank you, Katina. Okay. So some types of boundaries. Sally knows she can't let Jane down by showing any reluctance or weakness. That says to me she has a poor emotional boundary, emotional external boundary, because she's feeling external, she's feeling responsible for taking care of that thing that she is technically and literally not responsible for. So she has to set a more of an emotional external boundary. I'm feeling responsible for getting Jane in and out of the vehicle. Okay. So physical boundary is, I cannot do this. And we're going to get later into ways to say no. One of the things is you can blame your agency, because most agencies would be like, don't do that, please, on stuff like this. And that you may have to work with your supervisor. It's exactly what that looks like. For me and the agency I worked at the time, I was allowed to hold the transfer board enough to stabilize it, and that was it. And put the wheelchair into my car, because obviously that was not a possibility, and that was a small thing. But there were times with the peer that I worked with that it turned into, okay, we're not going to, what other ways can you think of to get in and out of our car if she was choosing not to do it herself? Well, I need you to do it. It's just this little thing. I recognize that, but that is outside of my role. And I knew she had staff 20 feet away that could do it, but she did not want to, which she had the freedom to do. If my goal had become her goal, oh, we have to get to Walmart today, then I would have been scrambling. Oh, I have to do this. But my goal was not. My goal was supporting her and finding her power. So I said, well, what are the options? What other things can you think of? And I could think of half a dozen, but that wasn't the problem, because the problem was she did not want to do those other things. The problem was she wanted me to do it. She wanted to be quick and easy and not have to ask other people. And so I had to set those boundaries, and that included sometimes not going out that day, which sometimes meant she would cancel the whole appointment because she was mad because I wouldn't pick her up and put her in my car. And that's okay, because that was not my job, and it would not have helped her, even though she was ticked about it. And my supervisor helped, supported me 100%, because I was supporting the company's boundaries as well. So have Sally make her own transportation arrangements with proper support. So that was Teresa. Yes, that is excellent. And I will tell you a little bit on how on that one. So that can include, and I wouldn't even say that, because that's a specific solution. And I would never suggest, because we want to stay off the SOFA, which is suggestions, opinions, feedback, and advice, because those are not our role. Those are CBRS, okay? And sometimes case management, never peer. And so when it comes to supporting it, it's like, how do you want to do this? How would you like to get in and out of my car? Oh, this is stupid. I don't want to do this way. Well, okay, well, how else would you like to get to where you want to go? Asking those open-ended questions, giving the power back to her. Even if she doesn't have ideas, asking, well, where could you look? How could you find that out? Because there's always something she or your peer can do. Always. That every time we swoop in, we're assuming that they can't. They may not know at the time, but there's always a way to get to where they're knowing. And finding that is powerful, right? Setting an internal physical boundary to keep her own health in mind. This is Erica. I recognize when she feels she's pushing herself. Absolutely. This is one of those scenarios in a situation like this where we would usually have to set an absolute rule. It's not like some days I can do it and some days I can't. I mean, there's things like that may come up like that are smaller, but something like this is just this for multiple reasons. It's a no, but with internal physical boundary, yes. Like, for instance, I have worked with multiple people that require wheelchairs. And in the past, I didn't have a problem putting them into my car. And so, but at this point in my life, I have developed bad enough arthritis and some other conditions that I can no longer do that. So I have to set that internal physical boundary of, I can't work with people that I have to move stuff into my car because I do not have the physical capacity to do so anymore, and not be mad at myself for it. That's okay. So this is one of those things. So Erica, that's a very, very good point. And then what specific boundaries would be appropriate to set and enforce? And you guys have said a bunch of good ones already. We got a lot of good things there. So now we have the third one, and I just put all the questions up at once because we don't need to scroll through that. So certified peer recovery coach, Tim, this is a different Tim than the earlier Tim, works with a peer named Penny who frequently flirts with Tim and sometimes gives him small gifts or treats during their appointments. Tim isn't interested in Penny and knows the gifts are cheap, so he plays along rather than making things awkward by asking her to stop. He would sometimes joke with Penny that if she advanced far enough in her recovery and didn't need services, he might take her out sometimes. What code of ethics are being violated by this scenario? Is this like setting off the alarms in your head like it is with me? I have a hard time even writing these things. I was like, Joy, you're doing the numbers.
I can help you on that.
Thank you, Mary.
CPSS do not accept gifts of significant value from those they serve.
Yes, and significant value doesn't have a dollar thing on it, right? A lot of times, people we work with in general on disability, they have very low income, so a dollar can be significant financial value. But even if it's something like homemade cookies cost her 15 cents, is it significant emotional value in this scenario? It absolutely is. So yeah, yeah, there's all kinds of things. 8, never engage in intimate activities. Absolutely. Now, does it matter that Tim isn't interested in Penny? No, these are activities that basically lead her on, aren't they? And you could, yeah, I don't know about you guys. It gives me the heebie-jeebies to even think about scenarios like this. But have you ever been in a scenario where you could tell somebody was interested in you, but you're just like, oh, I don't want to make this all weird, so I'm going to pretend I don't notice. And yeah, it's like, no, we're going to not do that. No, don't do that. Don't. It doesn't matter if you don't have feelings, because it can get in the way of somebody's recovery. So accepting gifts, then crossing the relationship boundary into more personal, set firm boundary and refer to the code of ethics, all kinds of things. You guys are getting lots of good ones. So what damage is possible from the ethical violations in this scenario? Damage to whom and damage how? Mm, 10 is dual relationships. Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's a possibility, even if that's not Tim's intent. If she sees him in a different way than just peer support, you got a dual relationship going on. Yep. Thank you, Leah. So what damage is possible here? Not only damaging to Erica's, like, not only damaging to Penny's recovery, but can also be damaging to her love life in general. Absolutely. If she's not trying to find relationships that are possible because of this, that could be, and she can have messed up expectations, trust issues, all sorts of things. Leah says harm her self-esteem. Absolutely. That's getting in the way of her recovery, and that's a whoa, no. Penny may end up having trust issues. Oh yeah. Speaking of somebody with trust issues, yes. Pierre gets a mixed message, relapse or hurt herself. Absolutely. It's easy fixed by setting clear boundaries, but clear boundaries aren't always easy, right? But I'm not interested. I'm not actually going out with her. I'm just, but still, we gotta do that. So damage to the peer and getting her hopes up, and then being let down, which could lead to more self-esteem issues. Absolutely, you guys are rocking it. So what types of boundaries, types and levels of boundaries would help Tim avoid the ethical violations? It could end up in a sexual assault charge. Now, from what we've seen here, there's not, but if he leads her on, depending on how her symptoms manifest, it could, even if he doesn't actually physically do anything. I have seen that kind of thing happen. So I was like, oh, nothing's happening here, but that doesn't mean that accusations may not be level. If he's breaking ethics, it could hurt his future as a peer support worker. Yeah. Honestly, I know supervisors that would fire people for this kind of situation because this is just like, no. Tim could refuse to work with female peers. That is a possibility. Not always that level of necessary, but if he struggles to set boundaries with females, and if he's particularly good looking or whatever, that may be an appropriate boundary. It's not always necessary, but it would depend on the situation. Physical and emotional boundaries. Absolutely. Physical boundaries is like, I don't accept the gifts, and I'm not going to joke about, well, maybe this is a possibility in the future, because with Penny, it's not a laughing matter. If he's making jokes like that, it's pretty obvious he knows how she feels. And that is not that then setting the physical boundary there, and setting the emotional boundary of, this is uncomfortable, but I'm going to deal with this appropriately rather than hiding and avoiding dealing with it because it's uncomfortable. Does that make sense? That's an emotional boundary. Because sometimes we let those emotions of, I don't want to deal with this. We let those kind of prevent us acting appropriately with situations because they're uncomfortable. But that can make things worse when we know. And a lot of times it's tied to our own things that we've dealt with. But yeah, as Stephanie mentions, damage to Tim because he could be set up for harassment. As I mentioned before, we don't see it necessarily here, but we can see the potential for her feeling led on, and that could lead to repercussions. And so absolutely. And an appropriate one that we haven't mentioned here, Todd he's like, okay, I thought she was just joking or whatever, going to a supervisor and saying, I can't work with this person anymore. She's developing feelings for me. And that makes things awkward. Honestly, even if he didn't joke about anything, that would probably be the most appropriate thing. Simply because even if he never did anything to lead it on, if she's feeling that way, is that going to get in the way of her recovery? Even if it has nothing to do with him specifically? Yeah, it will. Thank you, Danielle. Yes, it will. So it would be absolutely appropriate in this case to go to the supervisor and say, I think this peer is starting to develop feelings with me, probably want to assign them to somebody else. And they're like, and I can guarantee you a good supervisor is going to move them in lickety split. So yeah, and honestly, if you have trouble confronting the peer, that's a sneaky way to get around it. Is to talk to your supervisor and have that going around. Sorry, hit the wrong button, and that is where. Okay. So yes, we got some good ones there. They got a couple of tricky ones. But yes, that's appropriate. So scenario 4. So peer support Sally knows a woman named Barbara from church who has been struggling with symptoms of anxiety and depression. Sally shares some of her lived experience with Barbara and tells her about her role. This is appropriate because we advocate for recovery and recovery-based programs, right? Then Barbara seems encouraged by this, and a couple of weeks later, Sally is surprised when her supervisor gives Barbara to her as a new peer. Sally needed another peer in her schedule and feels like she might have somehow led Barbara to seek Sally out as a provider, so she feels obligated to help her and accepts the assignment. So which code of ethics are being violated in this scenario? Dual relationships, Bradley. Whoa, yeah. Dual relationships, absolutely. Even if it existed beforehand, still a dual relationship. And we could see all kinds of potential awkwardness. Anything else? What else we got? I mean, honestly, that's the big one, right? What damage is possible from the ethical violations in this scenario, and to whom and how? Come on, you guys, you've been so good. You're rocking it. I know you can do it. I'm trying to practice my listening and letting you guys talk. A snafu over the church bake sale could impede her recovery. Holy bananas. Yes. Yeah, I mean, we now know things about Barbara. Sally now knows things about Barbara that Barbara probably wouldn't have told a normal everyday person at church. And even if Sally doesn't even bring up stuff with the church bake sale, because we've shared Sally's shared lived experience, Sally's shared lived experience, and now Barbara knows things too. And that can get really awkward really fast. Yes, we are open to sharing our lived experience, but that can be, yeah, appropriate. And Teresa's jumping ahead. She's like, come on, we want to get through this. So, well, what boundaries? Refer to her somewhere else to help her. I would probably, what I would do is go to the supervisor. Because when we don't, we can't refer to other peer supports, but we can go to the supervisor and say, I can't accept this assignment because I know this person from church. She may not have mentioned that, but that'd be a dual relationship. And the supervisor, if they're a good supervisor, will be like, oh yeah, you're right. She didn't tell me that. Or yeah, we'll take care of it. It sounds like it puts the peer in an unnecessary complicated position. It can, Dominique. It can put the peer in an unnecessarily complicated position. I mean, it doesn't have to be too bad, but if we keep the dual relationship, yeah, that can be unnecessarily complicated. But if they come to the agency where you work and seek peer support services, and you go to your supervisor and you say, I know this person outside, I know him from church, this isn't going to work. And the supervisor says, okay, assign him to somebody else. Whoo, those unnecessary complications evaporate. Unless, of course, your coworker then says, did you know this about Barbara? And you're like, oh my gosh, now I had to do internal, like in work boundaries. No, go away. I have seen situations where a person comes and is receiving services from an agency, and they know somebody there, and that person would not work with them, and then they would actually step out of staffing so they wouldn't have to hear things that person was being staffed, which is a very respectful and good thing to do, because we want to respect the rights and dignity of those we serve as well, right? Oh, there's so many funky little rules here, isn't there? Absolutely. So next scenario 5 that I didn't number. So, certified family peer support Jenny is supporting a family from Mexico. She finds some of their customs uncomfortable and questions if some of the religious and cultural traditions may be contributing to some of the barriers the child with the diagnosis of severe emotional disturbance is experiencing. Discussing some of her theories with some of her friends on social media, changing the names for privacy, but including details of diagnoses and conditions. So, which code of ethics are being violated in this scenario? Cultural humility is absolutely being violated, but it is not a code of ethics. There's a code of ethics tied to that, though. Confidentiality, Bradley, absolutely. Sandra, 2 and 3 and 5. Oh man, you guys are gonna make me look these up.
Okay.
Discrimination, absolutely, Erica. Clear as day discrimination, clear as day violation of confidentiality. We also, it is that this person isn't showing very much cultural humility here, which sometimes they're trying to work it out, but they're not working it out in an appropriate way, correct? They're violating confidential. Now, even if they change the names, there's something called PHI, personal health information, that if it's something that, have you ever been in a situation where somebody starts talking about somebody and you know they mention no names, but you know exactly who they're talking about? Yes. And that sometimes we're like, oh, that can't possibly happen here. I'm always freaked out by the kind of times that happens, and how easy that is to happen. Mary, which one is 2?
2 is respect the rights and dignity of those they serve.
Absolutely not respecting dignity very much at all. And 3, which one is that?
3 was the confidentiality one.
Okay, and 5, I
Is-
know is conduct ourselves in a manner that fosters our own recovery.
Mhm.
It's sad when you have enough of these memorized that you could do that. But but yeah, they're not fostering themselves in a way that fosters their own recovery, because part of our own recovery a lot of times is learning how to respect others as well. What's 7, Mary?
The discrimination one.
Oh yeah. So which one was, I thought 3 was, oh, I know 7 is discrimination, 3 is confidentiality. Okay, we're good. And especially in small communities. And I know it's a lot of small communities. And oh my goodness, we do not want to go there. We do not. So what damage is possible from the ethical violations in this scenario, to whom and how? I hope you guys are just quiet because you're all typing, right? Typing in the Q&A. Oh, I guess so. Okay, if trust is violated, I wouldn't say it causes a trauma. Trauma is a very specific term that has been overused a lot in social media. So, but it can cause discomfort and it can cause a lack of trust, but can prevent the client from seeking help in the future. Absolutely. And if trust is violated, absolutely, that confidentiality is broken. Yeah, and all sorts of things like that. Damage to them and our agency, if damage to them if they lose trust, damage to our agency if they if trust is lost in the agency. And the peer may come across the social media post. So one of the things I will tell you guys right now, whatever social media you are on, lock it down. Do not make open posts. Do not let your default be open and available for others. Your Instagram, you only people that can see you are people that you're friends with. If you're on Facebook, nobody can see you unless they are your friends. And do not ever, 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 ever make friends with client peers or former peers on social media. Just that is by itself will sometimes get you fired directly. And even if your agency doesn't have strict rules like that, that's a violation waiting to happen. At the very least, it's a dual relationship. Plus, bonus, things like Facebook, if you lock your stuff down so that other people can't see your pictures or your posts, you don't get people spoofing and copying that stuff and making fake profiles of you, because it's locked down and strangers can't do that. So that's a bonus for being good with that. But peer may come across a social media post is a side effect of not doing it. And might promote greater conflict between family by promoting CPSS beliefs. Yeah, that's a possibility as well. And that affects the power differential, right? If they're like, oh, well, the peer support thinks this is like not good because it makes her uncomfortable, so we need to change this this cultural belief and practice. And some people in the family are like, no, and some people say yes, and now we're all angry, and it's all because that unequal power differential and putting too much weight in what the peer support's opinions were. Damage to the family support role of profession. I will agree with that. I've seen different ethical violations in a certain part of our state that were so extreme. There were absolutely ethical violations, but agencies in that region of the state refused to do peer support for years after that because of the violations of one or two that were kind of extreme and unfortunately very well known. So damaging to cultural traditions as a whole by spreading misinformation. I don't try to judge or try to diagnose. That could be part of it. It's rooted in culture, but yeah, I could see that if they're trying to figure out if that's tied to it, but it's not their job to figure out if it's tied to it. Their job is to support them while they work on stuff. I appears them by my friends list because I'm involved with the 12-step. Okay. So, Sandra, this is a very good question. This comes up a lot, especially if we're a peer recovery coach. You're going to probably have been involved with 12-step programs. And so, especially in small communities, it's very possible to have overlap between peer provider and the people that they serve in a recovery group, such as a 12-step group. This is something that needs to be avoided if possible. And it is absolutely a dual relationship if you're connected with them in the recovery groups and you work with them as a peer provider. That is a dual relationship. And if you are currently working with them, I would talk to your supervisor about that. They may need to be reassigned if possible. Otherwise, because this is something that comes up every time we teach a class, because it's like, oh no, but I'm really good at, I want to support this person. They say they want to go to a group and this group's working with them, but it's the group that I already work with. What do I do? Usually what we recommend in our classes is either talk to your supervisor about finding them a different support or possibly finding a different group. I've worked with peer providers who actually find themselves going to other towns or online for their support groups to avoid such conflicts. because it is absolutely a dual relationship. Okay, so yeah, Sandra, she doesn't always work with them directly, works in a hospital setting where you do see them. That is still a challenging thing. I know that there's an expectation of privacy in recovery groups, but it is not legally mandated like HIPAA. And in a hospital situation, you do have stuff like this, and that it's a messy kind of thing. Talk to your supervisor with that because it can be a problem. So specific boundaries, so internal boundaries might be, I'm going to keep my personal opinions about cultural practices separate. I'm going to, from my work, and possibly work on my cultural biases and cultural humility. And external boundaries, locking down social media, never discussing things with work on any kind of social media. I don't care if it's locked down, just don't do it. And even if you are struggling with this, you staff it at the office if you're struggling with this. But that it's also, as somebody mentioned, it's not her role to judge or diagnose. So why it's happening isn't important. Now, it affects like, how do I best support them? That is absolutely a staffing thing. As something you take to your clinical supervisor and you say, this is something, and I think it might be cultural, but I'm not clear on that. And how do I support this? Because this is weird to me. And you can staff it with it. But the expert on a person's culture is also always the person. So asking that individual, like, what does this mean to you? What's the story behind this kind of thing? Being curious and open is be very helpful and stuff like that. So is it a conflict of interest to host peer support groups where your assigned peers attend? So I actually run peer support groups at Access of Idaho, Access Behavioral Health, where I am employed. And I do, so if you should be running groups at the same agency that you are doing one-on-one peer services, in which case it is not a conflict of interest because you're still supporting them. You're just supporting them in two different types of peer things. And it's all under the same recovery plan. It's all under the same services. And that is not a conflict of interest. And of course, you want to be careful that you don't talk about private things while they're in groups. But it's not really a conflict of interest. So that was a good question, Dominique. Leah, allow the peer to educate you about their culture and beliefs. Absolutely. And so yeah, so there's just a lot of different things with that. So we have a lot of things going on here, and some of them it's just a little bit challenging, but you guys are doing great. So I'm going to give you guys some different tips that I've actually documented over the years of doing peer support that'll hopefully be helpful. You want to avoid letting your peer's goal become your goal. Your goal is to support your peer, not their goal, in working towards their goal, not supporting the goal. Taking their goal on ourselves can make it harder to keep boundaries that allow the peer to gain skills and resources to move into recovery. The instant we take their goal on, we're going to see ways to get that goal done. And that is not our job. Even if the peer is struggling to figure that out, doesn't matter. We're supporting them because part of being able to move into recovery is being able to figure out, what can I do? What is possible? What resources are appropriate for this? Where is my power? What strengths do I have? Building up skills, tools, and resources. And real quick definitions on those. Skills are abilities that we have or can develop to help us get closer to our goal. Seems pretty straightforward, but a lot of times that's the skill of knowing where to look. That's the skill of knowing how to use an electronic device. That's the skill of reaching out to people. That's the skill of asking questions. There's a lot of things that seem kind of basic sometimes when we're functioning, that for a person who has disabilities, which if they're on Medicaid, most of the time they have disabilities, that have been challenged, and people have been swooping and handing them things and doing these things for years, or and they have gotten to the point, I can't do it. I can't do anything. I am defined by my limitations. That's not strengths-based. So when we support the peer, we have faith in the peer, we have patience with the peer, we ask them questions with the faith that, who do you think could help you with that? It doesn't matter if they don't know right now, but we're showing faith and that can help build their confidence that they can figure it out. And we support them in finding ways to figure it out. That is incredibly empowering. Because a lot of times I can't get myself there. I can't drive. Most of the peers I've worked with over the years, no possibility of driving. But they can find the abilities, the skills, the tools, and the resources to get themselves there, and then they have power again, even if it's not getting in the car and driving themselves. Does that make sense? It's not about finding those other obvious power. It's about finding what power they do have. So do not ever make their goal your goal. Your goal is them. And then they figure the rest out with our support. Does that make sense? And then, are you seeing the peers' barriers and limitations or their strengths? And strengths, a lot of times we think, oh, it has to be strong, it has to be good. And basically, I have found for myself in my own recovery, as well as the peers that I work with, I have to identify strengths as anything I can do whatsoever, because we can build on that, build more strengths or build that one up. If you are looking for ways to help and fix things, then you're not strengths focused. What can you do? If I ask them, where can you look? I'm focusing on what they can do. Even if they aren't sure yet, even if they're scared, how can I support you in looking? Those sorts of things. We want to focus on what the peer can do, even if it currently seems small. Find hope in that. Support that. Your hope and focus can help your peer feel more capable and safer. So a lot of times it feels scary and unsafe to try new things, especially if we failed before, right? But as they move in a positive direction, that is how they move into recovery, right? Good boundaries focus on what is, not on what should be. Shoulds are nasty, nasty, nasty things in recovery, no matter what. And this is one of the reasons they are. If we allow our perception to be tainted by what we think a body or a peer or a system or ourselves should be doing, we will either become frustrated or try to fill in missing gaps by letting boundaries slip. Does that make sense? Oh, well, I should be able to get this wheelchair to the back of my car. I should be able to. Oh, no, now I'm in the chiropractor for the next 2 weeks and I can't get out, or I can't get out of bed. Because I wasn't dealing with what it was, with what is. I was dealing with what I was telling I should be. Should is a la-la land. It shouldn't work that way. It shouldn't be that way. Well, what is? What evidence do we have? And let's work with what is, because that's how progress is made, not in the la-la land of the shoulds, okay? Well, this should be going faster. I'm just going to speed it up a little. You should know this, and I'm going to have these expectations. Or this shouldn't have happened, or this should have happened. But it doesn't matter. We work with what is. And good boundaries focus on what is. Okay. And some, so another thing that, I'm going to give you guys some tips on how to say no, and I forgot to stick that slide in. But there's a lot of good ways to say no, because sometimes that's the hardest part about boundaries, right? Oh, I know I shouldn't do that, but if I feel really bad and it's really scary and I don't want to. But first thing I'm going to tell you guys, blame your agency, blame your code of ethics. Blame. We can blame shift sometimes with this, because sometimes if it's not like, I'm going to do this, I have gotten to the point where a lot of times I'm like, I won't do it. And it is because of a rule, but I have learned the reasons behind the rule and then it's beneficial. And then it has become more internalized to me. And I will say that because a lot of times up here, if I say, well, the agency doesn't let me do that, well, how are they going to know? And then I have to answer that, right? But, and my answer to that is, I know. And I also know why that rule is there. And sometimes it seems like a rule doesn't make sense. But one of the things I've learned is even when that's true, it still makes sense at some level. And I don't like to find out I was wrong because it didn't make sense to me before. Because then I found out it was wrong because something bit me in the butt, and I hate that. So I will blame the agency, and good supervisors be like, blame me all day long, and blame the agency. That's not allowed. I can't do that. And next thing, that includes blaming the code of ethics. I can't do that. It'd be a violation of my code of ethics. Again, you're gonna hear, well, how are they gonna know? I know. And I don't want to lose my certification. I don't want to lose my job. I don't want to lose my ability to ever work with you again. Oh, well, fine. And it doesn't matter. I know. And I know it's there for a reason, right? Because that's one of the things we covered in this class, right? It's not just about, yeah, I violated some codes of ethics. This is the damage it can do when we do it, right? The next thing is blame your own limitations. This is honestly a healthy part of recovery, and this can help with maintaining our own recovery, which is things like, I don't have the emotional capacity to really deal with that right now, and I just can't. Have you talked to your counselor about that? Who else can you talk to about that? Or I physically can't do that. And I have to, it is frustrating that my hands don't work the way that they used to, but I physically am not capable of doing that. What other resources do you have that could be able to help you with that? Blaming our own limitations is not a sign of weakness. It is not. It is good modeling that nobody is capable of everything. And that is absolutely relevant in all of our peers' lives, because peers that are on Medicaid, almost by definition, have disabilities and limitations that a lot of times they feel shame about. And so for us to be out here working a job and saying, I still have limitations that I honor and respect and say, I cannot do that, and I can still function, that is an excellent modeling and excellent way to share lived experience. Okay. Another way to say no is to remind the peer, I'm here to help you find your power, not take it from you. Oh, that'll bug them sometimes. Because but I wanted you to do it. I understand that, but that wouldn't be very fair to you, because then you're not figuring out how to do it. And then you're getting dependent on people like me, and that's not fair to you or to me. And then they're like, because a lot of times they want power, but that doesn't always translate the same way. But that I've found to be a very effective tool to use with peers when it comes to, but I don't want to. I recognize that it's hard. I know what it's like to do stuff that I didn't feel very capable of doing. I wasn't very good at. And I know it's very frustrating, but I also know when I do that, I can get stronger, and I don't get stronger when I avoid it. And so I'm here to help you find your power. How can I support you in finding that power? And they're gonna make faces and they're gonna make noises, and that's okay because this is the path of, and may choose, well, I'm not gonna do it. I don't want to even meet with you now. Okay, because we're here to support them and not the goal. That's okay. Some things I would avoid doing. I would avoid things like, we don't have time for that today, when the answer is really no, but we're just trying to avoid it. Because then they're like, oh, we can do it next time then, right? And no, that can damage trust, and it also it's not very honest, because it's not honest. And sometimes like, well, the weather's not good for that today. Well, if the answer is no, the answer is no. One of the things that we have to do in supporting boundaries is supporting ourselves and being able to say things directly, because pussyfooting around and avoiding the subject, it kicks the can down the road, and the can just gets bigger, and then we get trust issues, and then they're not finding other solutions, and it's not helping them or us. And it does get easier with practice. This is one of the biggest things I'll tell you guys with all this, is all of these things are things that we can practice for ourselves, as we move forward in our own recovery as well, and in setting good, healthy boundaries. Some more comments. Use the phrase, I'm not going to should on myself today, or shouldn't on myself today. And that's true as well. I usually use that with myself and not with my peers, but sometimes I'll be like, because if they're trying to should on me, I don't have to accept it. That's a boundary I've already set. That's an emotional boundary. It doesn't matter what they say. I have to know what my limitations are and where their power is. And I'm going to set boundaries based on that. Stephanie says, I will always provide encouragement with the peer's strengths first and foremost to try and reinforce their abilities of following through with something. This gives them a more positive reinforcement. I will do that as well. Sometimes I'm like, what have you done before to get through this? I'll usually try to help them identify it before I identify it, because that's another skill that can help them. Because then if I'm not there, they're like, wait, how did I do this before? I did do something like this before and I was able to get through it. And then they don't need me to prompt them, right? But how did you get through this before? And sometimes I'll be like, I've noticed last time you did this, this, and this. Oh yeah, I did do that. Oh. And that's a lot of strengths based as well. Yeah, if you set a boundary like that, safeguards you and also teaches them indirectly. Absolutely, that's a lot of what this is all about. More that we set boundaries, we are modeling good boundaries, and that's part of modeling recovery, which is part of our code of ethics, right? And it can be an extremely powerful set of tools to be able to do that. And that's part. So one of the things I've absolutely found with peer support, it's not like, got my 40 hours out in the field, get the basics down and go. The big thing for me is peer support, working in the field, has progressed my own recovery by reinforcing and teaching me new things. And as I move forward in that, I am able to even better support my peers with the furthering of the recovery, and it kind of snowballs in a wonderful, wonderful way. And I can tell you guys right now, boundaries are just so essential when it comes to keeping our code of ethics. There's just all kinds of things we can do with that, and avoiding burnout and supporting our peers in ways that will help empower them in ways that most other services can't do. And we can bring a lot of light. It's so much more hopeful when a person recognizes the things that they can do. And that doesn't happen if other people are swooping in, right? So do we have any more questions for me on these subjects before we end the class? We've got a few more minutes for questions. Q&A, more Q&A. Oh, thank you guys. But those aren't questions. Thank you for appreciating the class. And if you know people that might be interested in peer support, I do teach CPSS certification. And we have another class coming up on a couple of classes coming up in October at, I don't even remember our website off the top of my head. It's with CMI, Case Managers of Idaho. And I trained through them, and they should, if you go to their website, if you Google it, you'll find it. Any other questions, concerns, good jokes, bad jokes? No dirty jokes unless you're like really sneaky about it. We good? Mary, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Dyany, very much. Everybody, thank you for all your involvement. Also, it's been really a great presentation. I will send you an email in the next hour or so with the survey link and the links from the session. I did put the survey link in the chat. It's up there. Plus, I put Dyany's website and her email up there. And
you,
let's see, you have 2 days to finish the survey, and you can check all of the CEU requirements in your reminder email. If you have any questions, maybe one of my colleagues can throw the Empower Idaho email in the chat, and you can find the slides and the recording on the website in a few days. Thank you all for attending. It was a great session, and I know you're all going to be following that code of ethics after you leave here. Of course, you've been doing it up to this point. You're just going to be even better at it. So, wait a minute here. Oh, here's a bad joke. Why didn't the jalapeno practice archery? Because he didn't habanero. Okay, on that note, thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you. I'm going to remember that one.